as we know, did proceed to the Capitol. It soon became apparent to the Secret Service,
She does not want to be there.
Secret Service teams in the crowd, along with White House
Do your
staff,
duty, sister.
the security at the Capitol would not be sufficient.
I've had 2 or 3 phone conversations with Mr. Ornato when we were at the Ellipse, and then I had 4 men on Mr. Meadows' detail with me in between.
Work my detail, baby.
Those individuals, and then a few other good bodies on the ground. Just
Secret
Service in advance. They were getting notifications through their radios. And Mr. Ornato in one conversation had called me and said, make sure the chief knows that they're getting closer to the Capitol. It's
a compliment.
They're having trouble.
I'm not her type.
Ms. Hutchinson, when you said they were having trouble stacking bodies, did you mean that law enforcement at the Capitol needed more people to defend the Capitol from the rioters?
It was becoming clear to us and to the Secret Service that Capitol Police officers were getting overrun at the security barricades outside of the Capitol building. And they were short people to defend the building against the rioters.
Parade or march, whatever y'all talk about.
And you mentioned that Mr. Ornato was conveying this to you because he wanted you to tell Mr. Meadows. So did you tell Mr. Meadows that people were getting closer to the Capitol and that Capitol Police was having difficulty?
After I had the conversation with Mr. Meadows, after I had the conversation with Mr. Ornato, I went to have the discussion with Mr. Meadows. He was in a secure vehicle at the time making a call. So when I had gone over to the car, I went to open the door to let him know, and he had immediately shut it. I don't know who he was speaking with.
Chump.
It wasn't something that he regularly
Speculation,
did,
allegedly.
when I would go over to give him information. So I was a bit taken aback, but I didn't think much of it.
Take you back.
Thinking that I would be able to have the conversation with him a few moments later.
And were you able to have that conversation a few moments later?
Probably about 20 to 25 minutes later. There was another period in between where he shut the door again.
This worse than Watergate to me.
We had the conversation.
I'm just saying.
But at that point, there was a backlog.
Tell me what y'all think. Where's your ranking history?
And so you opened the door to the control car, and Mr. Meadows pulled it shut?
That's correct.
And he did that 2 times?
That's correct.
And when you finally were able to give Mr. Meadows the information about the violence at the Capitol, what was his reaction?
He almost had a lack of reaction. I remember him saying, all right, something to the effect of, how much longer does the president have left in this speech?
Again, much of this information about the potential for violence was known or learned before the onset of the violence, early enough for President Trump to take steps to prevent it. He could, for example, have urged the crowd at the Ellipse not to march to the Capitol. He could have condemned the violence immediately once it began, or he could have taken multiple other steps. But as we will see today and in later hearings, President Trump had something else in mind.
Tell them I'm still the president.
One other question at this point, Ms. Hutchinson.
But
were you aware of concerns that White House counsel Pat Cipollone or Eric Hirschman had about the language President Trump used in his Ellipse speech?
There were many discussions the morning of the 6th about the rhetoric of the speech that day. In my conversations with Mr. Hirschman, he had relayed that we would be foolish to include language that had been included.
Foolish for a fool?
Request,
You think it's common sense?
Along to the effect of, fight for Trump, we're going to march to the Capitol, I'll be there with you, fight for me, fight for what we're doing, fight for the movement. Things about the vice president at the time, too. Both Mr. Hirschman and White House counsel's office were urging the speechwriters to not include that language for legal concerns and also for the optics of
threats
what it could
or
portray
promises
the president wanting to do that day.
Or what?
And we just heard the president say that he would be with his supporters as they marched to the Capitol. Even though he did not end up going, he certainly wanted to.
He tried. He did everything he
question whether President Trump genuinely planned to come here to the Capitol on January 6th. In his book, Mark Meadows falsely wrote that after President Trump gave his speech on January 6th, he told Mr. Meadows that he was, quote, speaking metaphorically about the walk to the Capitol. As you will see, Donald Trump was not speaking metaphorically. As we heard earlier, Rudy Giuliani told Ms. Hutchinson that Mr. Trump planned to travel to the Capitol on January 6th. I want to pause for just a moment to ask you, Ms. Hutchinson, to explain some of the terminology you will hear today. We've heard you use two different terms to describe plans for the president's movement to the Capitol or anywhere else. One of those is a scheduled movement, and another one is OTR. Could you describe for us what each of those mean?
A scheduled presidential movement is on his official schedule. It's notified to the press and to a wide range of staff that will be traveling with him. It's known to the public, known to the Secret Service, and they're able to coordinate the movement days in advance. An off-the-record movement is confined to the knowledge of a very, very small group of advisors and staff. Typically, a very small group of staff would travel with him, mostly that are just included in the national security package. You can pull an off-the-record movement together in less than an hour.
I know it ain't gonna get no
it's a way
traction,
to kind of
but we
circumvent
documenting historic
to
event,
release it to the press,
bro.
if that's the goal of it, or to not have to have as many security parameters put in place
Like
ahead
when
of
they,
time.
what was that, in France when they had the revolution?
And let's turn back now to
What's
the
this?
president's plans to travel to the Capitol on January 6th.
And other
We know the White House
dictators trying to
counsel, Pat
control and
Cipollone,
take
was
over power.
concerned about the
They
legal
be always
implications
sitting
of
up
such
here
a trip.
accusing other people
He
of doing.
agreed with
Satan,
the
stop
Secret
that.
Service that it shouldn't happen.
We putting
Ms.
in work.
Hutchinson, did you have any conversations with Pat Cipollone about his concerns about the
Devil
president going to the
Pines
Capitol on
trying to
January 6th?
destroy this content.
On January 3rd, Mr. Cipollone had approached me, knowing that Mark had raised the prospect of going up to the Capitol on January 6th. Mr. Cipollone and I had a brief private conversation where he said to me, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. This would be legally a terrible idea for us. We have serious legal concerns if we go up to the Capitol that
Serious
day.
legal concerns.
And he then urged me to continue relaying that to Mr. Meadows.
Urge you.
Because it's my understanding that Mr. Cipollone thought that Mr. Meadows was indeed pushing this along with the president.
And we
I said,
understand,
we know he
Ms. Hutchinson,
cuckoo.
that you
Is you
also
cuckoo too?
spoke to Mr. Cipollone on the morning of the 6th
He said,
as
no,
you
I'm
were
just a
about to
kangaroo.
go to the rally on the Ellipse. And Mr. Cipollone said something to you like, make sure the movement to the Capitol does not happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I
They
walked
gotta
out onto
try to
my
control
that
this
morning.
clown.
And Mr. Cipollone said something
They
to
all
the
clowns,
effect of,
bro.
please make sure we don't go up to the
I
Capitol.
bet you if
Cassie.
they would
Keep in touch
these
with me.
road
We're going
ladies
to
would
get
have tried to
charged
go
with
up
every
there and
crime
protest, dude, they would have
imaginable
been
if we make that
more
movement happen.
security and more damage, and
And
they
do you
wouldn't have got
remember which
nowhere near that
crimes
freedom.
Mr. Cipollone was concerned
Pawns of
with?
Satan. Just
In the
keep
days leading
on
up to the
knocking, bro.
6th,
Watch
we had
this.
conversations about potentially obstructing justice.
Y'all can watch this whole thing on your
defrauding the
own if y'all
electoral
really want
count.
to. Please do, because
Let's hear
but I just
about
want you
some
to
of those
see what I'm saying
concerns
about this
that you mentioned
and how I
earlier
feel.
in one of your interviews
and
with
what I
us.
think is important. Listen up.
Having a private conversation with Pat late in the afternoon of 3rd or 4th, that Pat was concerned it would look like we were
They will not let me put January 6th committee interview Miss Hutchinson or Miss Cheney in the title of the video.
Very firm with my legal terms here, but that it would look like we were obstructing what was happening on Capitol Hill, and
She had to look to her lawyer like, bro,
he was
what am I supposed
also
to
worried
say?
that it would look like we were inciting a riot or encouraging a riot to erupt on the Capitol, at the Capitol.
Facts.
In fact, in the days before January 6th and on January 6th itself, President Trump expressed to multiple White House aides that he wanted to go to the Capitol after his speech. Here's what various White House aides have told the committee about the
She
president's
just like,
desire
Lord,
to
I
go to the
can't believe
Capitol.
this.
Did the
Got my
president tell
eyes
you
and
this,
crossed
that
my
he wanted to
T's.
speak at the Capitol?
Correct, yes.
During the meeting in the dining room, did the idea of the president proceeding or walking to the Capitol on the 6th after his speech come up?
Walking to the Capitol? No.
Driving to the Capitol?
It came up.
Okay, how did it come up and what was discussed?
You brought it up. You said, I want to go down to the Capitol.
What about
We know his
him
fat ass
marching
ain't
to
gonna
the
walk
Capitol
down
on the
there.
6th?
Yes.
No
Tell us about
disrespect.
that.
It's
So-
exercise.
It's kind of a general thing. I mean, to get into the specifics of it, I was aware of a desire of the president to potentially march to the or accompany the rally
Protesters.
attendees to the Capitol.
Yeah, the
When did you
rioters
first
to
hear
the
about
Capitol.
this idea of
The
the
crooks
president
to the
accompanying
Capitol.
rally attendees to the Capitol on the 6th?
Well, this was at the 6th. This was during the after he finished his remarks.
What you call them? What's that the word I'm
When the
looking for?
president said that he would be going to the Capitol during his speech on the ellipse,
Oh,
the Secret
God
Service
bless it.
scrambled to find a way for
What
him
is
to
the
go.
word?
We know this from witnesses
Trying to
and the
overthrow
Secret
the
Service,
traitors? That
also
ain't
from
it, but
messages among
that's a
staff
good word.
on the President's National Security Council. The NSC staff were monitoring the situation in real
They
time,
ain't patriots,
and
I
you
know
can
that.
see how the situation evolved in the following chat log
In my
that the
opinion, they ain't
committee
even
has
true
obtained.
Americans, bro. They
As you
doing
can
crazy
see,
stuff like that.
NSC
Endangering
staff
people, killing,
believed that Mogul,
and
the
a
president,
protester
was, quote, going
and
to the Capitol,
a police
and,
got
quote,
killed
they
that
are
day.
finding the best route
And some
now.
after that, you know what I mean?
From
By
these
just having
chats, we also know the
PTSD and
staff learned of the attack on the Capitol in real
stress
time. When President Trump left
from
the
this
ellipse
action,
stage
man.
at 1:10, the staff knew
I don't
that
understand how they think
rioters
that
had
they could try
invaded
to
the
let him try to
inaugural
run for
stage,
president
and
again,
Capitol
bro.
Police
This would be
were calling for
ridiculous,
all
but let him
available
run. Let
officers
him run. I
to
mean,
respond.
I don't want him to run, but if
When
we
Republican
would
leader
elect
Kevin
him again,
McCarthy
we would get
heard the
exactly what
president
we
say he was
deserve
going to the Capitol,
in Sodom
he
and
called you, Ms.
Gomorrah,
Hutchinson.
wherever that's at. Watch this.
Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And in this text message, you told Tony Ornato, quote, McCarthy just called me too. And do you guys think you're coming to my office? Tell us about the call that day with Leader McCarthy during the president's speech on the ellipse.
How about I get to the part I need? I
I
don't
was
want to do
still
a
in
part
the
3.
tent behind the stage, and when you're behind the stage,
I know ain't nobody
you
watching
can't really
anyway.
hear what's
But
going
watch.
on in front of you. So when Mr. McCarthy called me with this information, I answered the call, and he sounded rushed, but also frustrated and angry at me. And I was confused because I didn't know what the president had just said. He then explained, the president just said he's marching to the Capitol. You told me this whole week you aren't coming up here. Why would you lie to me? I said, I'm not lying. I wasn't lying to you, sir. We're not going to the Capitol. And he said, well,
Republican dude is like,
just said it
don't
on
let him
stage,
near
Cassie.
me.
Figure it out.
Like
Don't
Jamie
come up
Foxx
here.
and Snoop.
I said,
And they thought Suge was out there. You ain't
I'll
gonna
run
let
the
him
traps
in,
limit,
is you?
and I'll shoot you a text. I can assure you we're not coming up to the Capitol. We've already made that decision. He pressed a little bit more, believing me, but I think frustrated that the
Chump
president
was
had
still
said
trying.
that. And we ended the phone
Little
conversation after
pig,
that.
let me
I
in.
called Mr. Ornato
He
to
said, not
reconfirm that we
Chump by
weren't
the
going
hair on
to
your
the Capitol,
chinny chin.
and which is also in our text messages. I sent Mr. McCarthy another text telling him the affirmative that we were not going up to the Capitol, and he didn't respond.